You won't believe what happened when two rookie female cops responded to a routine call in a quiet neighborhood. It started as just another day on patrol, but things quickly took a turn they never saw coming. These officers were confident, ready to prove themselves, and determined to handle whatever came their way. But as the situation unfolded, they found themselves in over their heads, facing an unexpected twist that left them completely out of their element. What they thought would be a simple check spiraled into a chaotic showdown with a character so unpredictable, it left them questioning everything. Was it quick thinking or sheer luck that got them out of it? One thing's for sure, this was a day they'll never forget. Stay tuned to see how it all goes down. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss how this story ends. As the two officers stepped out of their cruiser, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet street. The neighborhood seemed peaceful, too peaceful, almost like it was holding its breath. The call had come from an anonymous tip. Strange noises coming from an old house on the corner, the one that everyone seemed to avoid. It looked abandoned, with peeling paint, boarded-up windows, and a rusted gate hanging crookedly on its hinges. But as they approached, something about it felt off, like they were being watched. Officer Davis, the more seasoned of the two, led the way, her hand resting cautiously on her holster. Her partner, Officer Mills, followed close behind, trying to hide the nervous energy that made her palms sweat. The air felt heavier with each step, and when they reached the front porch, the faint sound of movement inside stopped them cold. Someone, or something, was definitely in there. Davis glanced at Mills, giving a subtle nod before reaching for the door. It creaked open slightly, as if inviting them in, but the house was eerily silent now. The faint smell of mildew hung in the air, mixed with something metallic they couldn't quite place. Inside, the shadows seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally, making it hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. "Stay close," Davis whispered, her voice low but firm. Mills nodded, gripping her flashlight tightly, its beam barely cutting through the dim interior. Broken furniture and scattered papers littered the floor, as though someone had left in a hurry, or perhaps ransacked the place. But why? Then from somewhere deeper in the house, a muffled thud echoed, followed by a faint scratching sound. Mills froze, her breath catching in her throat. Davis gestured for her to follow as they moved cautiously toward the noise, their footsteps unnervingly loud against the creaky wooden floor. They had no idea what or who was waiting for them in the shadows. The sound grew louder as they moved deeper into the house, leading them down a narrow hallway where the walls seemed to close in around them. Mill's flashlight flickered for a moment, and her heart raced as she frantically tapped it to keep the beam steady. The scratching sound stopped suddenly, replaced by an eerie silence that made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. Davis motioned toward a partially open door at the end of the hall. Light seeped through the crack, faint but deliberate, as if someone, or something, wanted to draw them closer. They exchanged a quick glance, their unspoken understanding clear. There was no turning back now. As Davis pushed the door open, the creak seemed to echo endlessly in the quiet house. The room was small and cluttered, with papers scattered across a desk and a strange, faintly glowing device humming in the corner. But before they could make sense of it, a figure darted past the doorway behind them, so fast it was barely more than a shadow. Mill spun around, her flashlight trembling as she searched for movement. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Davis didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on something ahead, a closet door slightly ajar, where faint whispers seemed to be coming from. With each step they took, the whispers grew louder, like they were being drawn into something far bigger than they had anticipated. Davis held up a hand to signal Mills to stay back as she approached the closet door, her pulse quickening with every step. The whispers grew clearer, but they didn't make sense. Broken phrases in a language neither of them could understand, spoken in overlapping tones that seemed too unnatural to be just one voice. Davis tightened her grip on her weapon, nudging the door open with the tip of her boot. The closet was empty. Just bare shelves and dust, nothing that could explain the whispers. But as the sound suddenly stopped, both officers froze. From behind them came a soft, deliberate click, like the sound of a lock sliding into place. Mills spun around, her flashlight catching the outline of the figure they had seen earlier. This time, it didn't dart away. It stood still at the end of the hallway, its features obscured by the dim light, but its presence was undeniably menacing. "Stop right there," Davis commanded, raising her weapon. But the figure didn't respond. It simply raised its hand, revealing a small device identical to the one they'd seen on the desk earlier. Before either officer could react, the device emitted a low, pulsing tone that seemed to reverberate through the walls. The house began to shake, the floorboards groaning under their feet, as if the entire structure were coming alive. Mills grabbed Davis' arm, her voice trembling. "What is this? What's happening?" But Davis didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the figure, which had now turned and was walking toward the front door, calm, deliberate, and entirely unaffected by the chaos. Then just as suddenly as it started, the shaking stopped. The house fell silent again, but the figure was gone, leaving Davis and Mills in the eerie stillness, their minds racing with questions. Whatever they had walked into, it wasn't over. And now it seemed they weren't the only ones trapped in the mystery. Davis and Mills stood frozen, the silence pressing down on them like a weight. Mills' breathing was uneven, her flashlight trembling slightly in her grip. "What just happened?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Davis didn't respond right away. She was staring at the glowing device on the desk, its low hum now pulsing rhythmically, almost like it was alive. Unable to ignore it, Davis approached cautiously, signaling Mills to cover her. As she leaned in, the device flickered, casting strange shadows across the room. Without warning, it projected a series of images onto the wall, blueprints of the house, maps with cryptic markings, and a sequence of faces they didn't recognize. Among them, however, was one that made Mills gasp. It was the figure they'd seen, now clearly illuminated. A man with sharp features and cold eyes, someone who seemed unnervingly familiar. Before they could process it, the hum from the device grew louder, and the house began to tremble again. This time, the shaking wasn't random. The walls started to shift, revealing hidden passages and staircases that hadn't been there before. The officers exchanged a panicked look as a chilling realization set in. The house wasn't just some rundown property. It was a carefully designed trap. Davis reached for her radio, but the signal was dead. "We need to move," she said, her voice firm despite the fear creeping in. They followed one of the newly revealed staircases, descending into a dark, cavernous space that felt miles away from the world outside. At the bottom, they found themselves in a room filled with equipment, computers, surveillance monitors, and more of the strange devices. The screen showed live footage of places they couldn't identify, as well as recordings of other people who had seemingly entered the house and never left. As they scanned the room, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was the man from the projection, but now his face carried a sinister smirk. "You were never supposed to find this," he said calmly. "But since you have, you'll be staying." Before they could react, the room plunged into darkness, and a sudden mechanical whir filled the air. When the lights flickered back on, the man was gone, but a single message flashed across the monitors. Asterisk, asterisk, you've seen too much. Asterisk, asterisk. Realizing they'd uncovered something far bigger than they could handle, Davis and Mills raced back up the stairs, their only thought now being survival. But as they reached the front door, it slammed shut in front of them, locking with a final, deafening click. Whatever was happening, they were far from escaping it. And someone was always watching. Davis and Mills stood in the dim hallway, their hearts pounding as the weight of their situation sank in. Desperation kicked in, and Davis began searching for another way out. Mills noticed a faint draft coming from behind a bookshelf, and with a rush of adrenaline, they pushed it aside, revealing a hidden exit. The passage was narrow and dark, but it was their only chance.